Warning: this program may contain visuals that might offend sensitive viewers. Parental guidance is advised.
Alcoholism is a destructive disease whose consequences are catastrophic to users and their loved ones. As binge drinking spirals out of control, abusers slide further into the cycle of addiction, alienating themselves from others and wrecking their own lives in the process.
Ngisho nje ngizilalela nabantu abadala ukuthi ngithola imali indaba yokuhamba ngifuna umsebenzi angikaze ngayicabanga. Fana nokuthi umuntu othengisa umzimba.
Sitho lesesivuka la singazikhona ukuthi kukuphi. Lokho futhi khona okuyingozi nakakhulu ke futhi lokho kodwa siyaqhubeka sikwenze noma sazi ukuthi kahle kahle akukho right.
Baba sathi mwansati wa swi kota ku dlela byale na famba namuntlha ripela siye n'wana na n'wanuna ndzeni ka yindlu ri tlherisa nampundzu a nga pfuka a vuya ta vona n'wana hi swo swi endlaka ku vavanuna va xanisa vana va va rape va endla swin'wana na swin'wana vana va nga receive emindyangwini.
Ngicabanga ukuthi impilo engizikhethele yona impilo right for me.
In June 2022, 21 teenagers died at the Enyobeni Tavern in Scenery Park, East London. The deaths of the teenagers were a national tragedy. The youngest of the teenagers was only 14 years old. According to the World Health Organization, South Africa has one of the highest per capita rates of alcohol consumption in the world. Researchers show that most youngsters are underage when they start drinking. In this episode, we tell stories of young people who struggle with alcohol.
Ngilala nabantu abadala for ukuthi ngithola utshwala angisakhona ukubiyeka angisakhona nje ukuhlala ngaphuzi. Sometimes nokuyenza lento ezirong ngithanda utshwala ngizithandela ngapha negambling angikhona nje ukulala ngayibambanga eone.
Ntombi, not her real name, says that she began drinking heavily in high school. Alcohol has been part of her everyday life for many years.
Ngicala ukuphuza utshwala besihamba ama-house party sisafunda isikolo, I think grade 8. Sihamba ama-house party, siphuza amabhodlela cheapy. So ngabona ukuthi ukuhlala udakiwe kumnandi, like ngathi uhlala uhigh, angathi akubi uwo ukuthola energy, ngathi kuma-drugs so maphuza utshwala. So ngaqala lapho ukuphuza utshwala ngayekela isikolo, ngahamba ekhaya, ngihamba ngihlalisana nabangani. Futhi mawuphuza utshwala nje awufuni ukuzwa abantu, awufuni nje futhi ukuphuzwa.
Ntombi is unemployed but finds means to sustain her drinking habit.
Noku-aplya nje akusinto engicabangayo mangivukile. As long as ngizozitholela ikhothe one utshwala, ngiset. Ngisho nje ngizilalela nabantu abadala ukuthi ngithola imali indaba yokuhamba ngifuna umsebenzi angikaze ngayicabanga.
So i-alcoholism yakho i-financial abantu abadala?
Amadoda etshwaleni. Angisho nokuthi uhambe uphuza utshwala uzothola umuntu uhambe uyolala naye. Ngakusasa kuthengele i-6 pack okuthola umuntu etshwaleni akuthengela ama-beer 2. Kube kanjalo nje.
She says she might have a drinking problem but isn't willing to get help to overcome it.
Angeke ngisho ukuthi anginayo mara ngicabanga ukuthi mabangathi bayangisiza ngotshwala ngingavuma. Because ngicabanga ukuthi impilo engizikhethele yona impilo right for me. Etshwaleni abajajani, etshwaleni uba free, etshwaleni uba uwe, etshwaleni uyajabula nje uba uwe. So ngicabanga ukuthi nje noma ngathi bayangisiza ngingavuma ukusizakala ngendaba yotshwala.
Tane Newport, who is a social worker at New Day Rehab Centre in Alberton, says denial is a big issue for alcohol abusers.
Denial is tough because one cannot actually get help unless they admit that there's a problem. You know, why would you change something that you don't think is a problem? So denial prevents someone from getting the treatment as well as delays it until they come out of that denial. It's very difficult to break denial without the person realizing it for themselves.
Dombi says the only thing she hates about her drinking problem is that it keeps her away from her children and family.
Lento engiyiphila ngize ngiyibiza ukuthi impilo because nginabantwana abayi-3 lo munye omdala nokuthi ngamgcina nina angimazi ekhaya ukuthi bangigcine nini nje angazi because ngumuntu ohamba phuza utshwala angiyi ekhaya like utshwala i-addiction so nje hayi impilo yami ayihlangani.
Dombi left her children in her mother's care, who is also unemployed, and says she hopes for a better life for her children.
Angeke ngize ngifisa ukuthi umntana abe nale mpilo lengiyiphilile aphile njengami because nje angifuna ukucambama mina ngiyahluleka. Mangicabanga bona futhi esikhathini esiningi into enza ukuthi like ngiphuze kakhulu ukuthi why ngikhetha impilo ukuthi ngishiye abantwana bami. Into enza ukuthi ngiphuze kakhulu futhi nakhona akusi-fault yamuntu ngoba yimi engikhethile life le. Mara mangiphinde ngicabanga ukuthi abantwana bami angiyobabona.
Dombi's 19-year-old sister agreed to speak to us and says that her sister's behavior has made life very difficult for their family.
Unabantwana akabanakekeli banakekelwa yimamncane wabo nogogo wabo uyahamba nje ama-months or weeks singamboni hlezi asetshwaleni njalo masomthola emathaveni adakiwe akazingeni nje ngosuku ukufuna umsebenzi or anything nje. Usisi wami umphatha nje ngenye indlela ngathi labantwana bazalile mina akabanakekeli ubashiya nami mina kumele ngivuke ekuseni ngibalungisele ukuthi baye esikoleni and then umama ugogo wabantwana yena unokuthi nje bekanokuthi amkhuze usisi wami mara nje sekakhathele usisi wami akakhuzeki umama nje ulahlele nje ithawula ugeza izandla kuyi akasazingeni ngoba usisi wami ayikho nje into azimisele ngayo empilweni yakhe ngaphandle kotshwala.
I believe there's a few factors around why the youth is turning to alcohol. I think it's learned behavior. You know, when you see it in movies and you see your parents doing it and you see your parents' friends doing it and everyone around you is doing it, it seems like the norm to do it. So when you're growing up in that environment and that's what you're seeing, you're learning from a young age that that's how to cope with life. But alcohol is very accessible. I mean, it's sitting in your parents' houses for most people. There's shebeens everywhere. There's alcohol liquor stores everywhere. You go to the grocery store and there's liquor in the aisle. And it's not necessarily monitored very well. You know, from a young age, people start drinking from 15, 16, and they just bought it from the liquor store. You know, they didn't ask for ID. They didn't really care.
Dombi has found herself in dangerous situations because of alcohol. But despite this, she cannot contemplate life without it.
Ngiyafana nje nokuthi umuntu othengisa umzimba. Ngiyafana nje nabantu abathengisa umzimba. Because unokulala uyenza izinto ongafuni ukuziyenza for utshwala. Hambe nabantu ongafuni ukuhamba nabo nje for ukuthola utshwala. And mase uzifakile utshwaleni fana nebhiya. Ibhiya amaphuzu utshwala uyizwa so ugcine sofuna into ezishisayo ama-vodka nanani. Uzosithola sesileli phansi ngoba sesidakiwe ngoba sifaka nesnefu la. Sisebenzisa nesnefi bese lapho ke siyadakwa siyalala phansi abanye abantu bathatha advantage basilale akusimpilo nje so ukuthi angeke uthi ufuna usizo because ngizohamba ngibangise rehab yotshwala mangibuya futhi mawubona umuntu aphethe utshwala obvious uzohalela phinde ubuyena.
Lindokuhle, who is Ntombi's friend, also unemployed, says alcohol abuse is a real problem in her community and in her life.
Yo, impilo life osaraso yo ayikuyaphuza shema ngifuna uqamba manga abantu abaphuzayo labo bangangathi kakhulu ayisaphuza nje mongathi uyahamba amathaveni amaningi nje ufica abantu abangangathi bona abaphuzayo nje yo masesiphuzile ziningi nezinto esizenzayo masesidakwotshwala siyajola senze yonke lezo zinto lezo sitho lesesivuka la singazikhona ukuthi kukuphi lokho futhi khona okuyingozi nakakhulu ke futhi lokho kodwa siyaqhubeka sikwenze noma sazi ukuthi kahle kukho right.
Ntombi's heavy drinking has caused her to black out on many occasions, and she says because of this she has been sexually assaulted but has never reported it to the police.
Angeke ngireport ngoba into asetshwaleni and kuyenzeka ukuthi like kulalwa amadoda ayi4 uzothi ubani unobufakazi ubani uzokumela ukuthi umuntu lo vele bayile bamlala ngenkani because mina into eke yangenzakalela bengisetshwaleni into esidakwa kakhulu siphuza ama-vodka or siphuza ibhiya sifaka isnefu lana the next thing siyalokha masilokha ey'tulweni thole ukuthi etshwaleni sebayavala uma uhamba uwa amadoda nje so ukuthi uzozilalela esitradeni indoda izoyenza into ayifunayo so uzothi ubani because awazi nokuthi kuyenzakaleni umuntu awamazi nasefisini ukuthi ubani uzoreport ukuthi kuyenzakaleni.
So when someone's drinking and passes out, they're unconscious. They will lie there and they're not awake. However, when someone has a blackout, they're still quite conscious of what's happening. You know, they carry on doing whatever they're doing. They'll carry on partying, for example, or drive, hopefully not, but they will carry on doing what they were doing. However, they won't remember it. So there will be memory loss throughout the night if they are having blackouts. Blackouts is also generally a cause for concern, and that says that someone is moving into the stage of alcoholism.
The inability to recall events from the previous day fuels the pervasive guilt and shame common to alcohol users. Tain says blacking out can develop into something more serious and long-term.
Korsakoff syndrome is, in layman's terms, wet brain. I'll often look at it as similar to, I want to say Asperger's, not Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's and Parkinson's combined, you know, so they start having memory loss, they start struggling with their fine motor skills, they start having something called confabulation. So basically where the memory is lost, their brain fills in the gaps, and it's not always true information that they're filling in the gaps with. Korsakoff's is not a very common thing that happens, but it can happen and you don't know if it's going to happen to you. You know, a lot of people think something like wet brain would only be caused at a later stage in one's life, but I've also met someone that had Korsakoff's by the time they were in their 30s.
Despite the dangers associated with drinking, Lindokuhle says she is not willing to stop.
Angiboni ukuthi singakhona ukuthi ngibiyeke ngoba sesisithi isikhathi ngiphuza maybe kunoma 12 years ngiphuza utshwala angiboni ukuthi singakhona ukuthi ngibiyeke and into enginokuyibona mangiphuzile nje angibi na stress ngiyakhohlwa into eziningi ezenzakalayo ngibona bu right utshwala for mina ngendlela engikhule ngayo.
The elders in the community say that they are worried about the future of youngsters in the area.
Baba said wansati wa swi kota ku tlela byale na famba namuntlha ri pele siye n'wana na n'wanuna ndzeni ka yindlu ri tlherisa nampundza a nga pfuka a vuya ta vona n'wana hi swo swi endlaku ku vavanuna va xanisa vana va rape va endla swin'wana na swin'wana vana va nga receive emindyangwini sweswi le ku rileni vana va thula va nga lahleka lawa a hi swi ku nkingha ya kona i ncini i ku va ri hava yini n'wana a nga heti 3 hours i nga n'wi voni wena mutswari wa yena mara sweswi laha swi le ku endlekeni swinene hi le ku tweni ka ku vava a hi swi koti a hi swi tivi ku ta endla yini hi ku loko munhu n'wi hlamula i ri leswi a nga xiswona ndhavuko wa yena vana va exikolweni a va vi right va fambafamba va jikajiki hinkwako vatswari vana va fanekele va landza vatswari va vona nkarhi wun'wana mi kuma ku loko n'wansati a phuzi hini hi tiva ku a byaleni n'wana wa 18 years a nga ngheni n'wana wa le hansi ka 18 years a nga ngheni a byaleni mara n'wana ntsongo mi kuma n'wana a phuza loko mhani a veka bodlhela n'wana i teka bodlhela a phuza na yena ana
abantwana abancane bayaphuza abasayi nasesikolweni abanye babhema idakamizwa abasamameli nabazali abanye bashaya nabazali uthola umntwana atshontsha imali yomzali athatha imali yegrant kagogo ayophuza utshwala.
How can parents and the community stop teenage alcoholism?
We need to educate our own children, and I think really it boils down to you and I taking care of our own households. The minute I take care of my children in my own house and know where they are 24/7, what they are doing with whom, I will then be reducing that irrespective of what the advertisement has done. I shouldn't expect the schools to do that. I shouldn't expect the pastors to do it or any other person, not even SABC members or any other law enforcement agency, but you and I should play a part, and that's how really we can resolve some of the issues. Should you see that as a member of the community, whether it is selling wine to an under 18 or a shebeen in the township, it doesn't matter. Just take a picture, forward it to us. When it comes to that, it's one of those zero tolerance matters. We shut them down with immediate effect until such time that, mitigating factors, of course, by the board would take place and so on.
Alcohol, like many substances that erode our society, is addictive and has far-reaching consequences for alcoholics, their families and friends. If abused for long periods, it can be lethal. 31-year-old Dumisani Dladla says he started drinking in university.
At first it was fun, we're going out drinking, there's all these parties, there's all these promotions at university, and then from there it became my emotional crutch, where when things are going wrong, I want to get drunk and I'd rather just black out, So the dependency actually began in 2014 for me. That's when I started using alcohol as a crutch. When I was feeling bad, it actually became an everyday thing. I wake up in the morning, the first thing I want to do is drink, before I sleep, or I can't even sleep. So the next best thing to do is to just drink.
After graduating, Dumisani found a job, but because he was now dependent on alcohol, he continued drinking, sometimes even at work.
I was a functional user, so I would make sure that everything is going accordingly and then still need it. So I would carry it to work and I would hide it when I was at work, but when nobody's looking, I'd take a sip or two, and then that's when I realized that this is not normal, because people use it for celebrations but I started using it on a day-to-day just to function. I started feeling like I'm not myself if I have not used, if I have not drank, and that's when I realized that something is wrong.
Tain explains that it is difficult and can be dangerous for alcoholics to suddenly stop drinking.
If someone is not having withdrawal symptoms, someone is able to stop, they just have a bad hangover, but they can come right after a few days, then no, there's not really a danger. However, if someone is drinking to the point where they're waking up shaking, they may be having seizures. The seizures can be very dangerous. So one can, it can be fatal when you have a seizure based on alcohol withdrawals. So if you're in that area of alcoholism, then yes, it can be very, very dangerous to just stop, and one would need to either wean oneself off or they would need to have a medical detox. The weaning off is a difficult process because they tend to not last very long and they tend to start drinking a lot very quickly. However, with a medical detox, it's probably the best way to do it.
Dumisani's drinking also affected his relationship with his family because he manipulated them into giving him money to buy alcohol.
Relationships are compromised. So my relationship with my family was compromised. I was lying a lot because if I don't have money, I'm definitely making means to get money from them. I'm extorting them. I'm telling them all these stories. I'm borrowing money from one person to pay another person just so another person can, give me money to get. So my relationships were compromised because I was lying to a lot of my family members. I was telling them different stories. At the same time, when I don't have, I was miserable. So you can imagine me sober. I was definitely a dry drunk when I was sober because I don't have my substance, I don't have my alcohol, I'm miserable towards them.
He would get paid but spend all his money on alcohol.
I would get paid this week and next week I'm completely broke, and that was a vicious cycle. And it started becoming scary when I started realizing that the debts is rising, steadily so. And that was kind of one of the major things that happened. But another one is I started compromising how I looked, started compromising what I ate. I lost a lot of weight, because I was depriving myself of food. I started even compromising my bathing, as an example. I started saying to myself, no, I've had a bath like 2 days ago, so I'm still okay. And, when I took an internal look and I was like, no, this is not who I am. I guess that's when I started saying something is up. But the worst was, getting drunk and waking up and realizing I don't know where I'm at. And funny enough, I think music has a huge impact on that because there are songs like Mawazu Lalepi, which kind of promote that. And it seemed cool at the time, but when you actually look at it from a realistic perspective, it's very dangerous, be in the Val and then waking up in Pretoria and not knowing where you are. That was one of the craziest things that I've done. That was also that was an eye-opener for me, because having to hustle my way back home, and having to find myself begging and asking people just to give me money to get back home, that was a definite shocker for me. And that's when I was like, no, this is, it's gone too far.
He decided to book himself into rehab after realizing that he was failing to do basic duties at work.
So for me, I was at work at the time. I was doing something very simple. I was working in human resources, which is very ironic. And, I realized that I'm failing to do the basic stuff that's required of me, and it's having an impact on other people's salaries. And I was like, this is not who I am, you know. And I went into my senior manager's office at the time, and she was like, what's going on? You know, and she asked that from the heart, you know, and for the first time, it really hit home, because I was like, I know I need help. And instead of trying to cover it up with lies and trying to, you know, give a false story, I just became very vulnerable and very honest. And I was like, look, I'm struggling with this addiction, you know, and I need the help.
In my career, I've heard so many different things that have caused people to want to change. You know, some people, their lives are pretty functional, but they just wake up and realize they don't like themselves. Some people, it's a loss of job. Some people, it's health implications where they land up with cirrhosis or Korsakoff syndrome. Some people, it really is just family problems and they can't deal with the family problems. Some people, it is work problems, you know, so it's different for every single individual, and sometimes it's just the voice inside of them that clicks and says, I don't want to do this anymore.
Dumisani has been sober for 3 years.
It has been a challenge, I'm not going to lie. It has been 2 years where I've been completely sober, completely clean, and, you know, starting my 3rd year, it's definitely a challenge and a half for me. Definitely with the help of the environment that I'm in, definitely with the people that I've met, because this is a community, you know, and a lot of people don't know that about this community because we go about as anonymous people. But with the help of the community of Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, definitely has helped me to, you know, keep my sobriety for that long.
He says he still gets triggers every now and then.
When watching a movie, when watching series, when sitting with friends. One of my biggest triggers was a series recently. It's called Euphoria, where the series itself is intended to educate people on, you know, drugs and alcohol and what they can do. And whilst they're doing that, you know, they're actively showing people using and actively showing people drinking. And those are triggers for me. So triggers are all around me. You know, it's just a matter of me preparing myself and, you know, always ensuring that I can stay away from such things. So for anybody that is definitely struggling with that, I would definitely say seek help. You know, it definitely does help. This stigma or the stereotype that, you know, rehabilitation is for certain type of people is not true, you know, because we have different people who are using, they're functional users. There are people who are dysfunctionally using, you know, and they think that there is no hope and there is no help for them, when in reality, it's as simple as just a phone call away. And help is definitely there, and it can make your life a whole lot better.
Ntombi and Lindokuhle's future may seem uncertain right now, but if they are willing to change their lives and admit that they need help, they might find a new lease on life.